Hello, and welcome to Rage Against the Dark Arts. With me today is Mona. You know her as Fat Grammy, and also on the channel Scientology Crimes. Mona is becoming, a close friend of mine. I really appreciate her, ability to dive in deeper into the details. She also just is someone who I feel like has similar values and interests, and where our attention is sort of going in similar places. So I really do enjoy working with Mona on and talking about these types of issues. And today we're going to talk about a bit of a spectrum, but mainly we're going to sort of wrap up a conversation that we had a couple of weeks ago, and then we're going to move on to mandatory reporting laws in California. We'll see how much we can cover. We've also got some things happening in Australia, so hopefully I can touch on that towards the end. But if we don't get to that, I have got a couple of posts up on my channel as well, on my community page, so you can go ahead and have a look at that if you'd like to. All right, welcome, Mona. Thanks so much for being with me today.
Well, thank you, my beautiful and brilliant Mirriam Francis. Thank you very much. I certainly appreciate it. I'm going to forewarn everybody, we're on Mirriam's channel, and my channels are also streaming, so I should see your chat, but if not, sorry. But it should just flip right into this. So I'm not ignoring you, just in case.
Okay, beautiful. Excellent. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining in with us. Abuses of Scientology, great to see you here. Mandy Me, she's slipping between the channels, hitting the like button. Thank you so much for your support. Afila is here. Thank you so much for being here. Style Audit 1A, beautiful. And my amazing mod as well, Amanda Beaumont. It's so great to have you with us, and I just really appreciate the support as well. And we've got some Aussie love in here. Thank you very much, Marie. Yeah. So, well, let's get cracking. Hey. So we talked about in our last live together, we talked about the topic of child labor in the U.S.
We did.
Okay. Yeah. And sorry, I don't know what's happening with my screen. Just one. How do I make that better?
You have to have some technical difficulties.
Yeah, I'm definitely having one right now because it's changed my screen and now I can't read. Okay, we'll do this. Okay. All right, so but one of the things that I had in my notes that I totally blanked on and I totally left out of the discussion, and so I apologize to everybody, is this ruling by the Supreme Court in the U.S., Prince versus Massachusetts, that occurred in 1944. And I'm going to take you through a bit of the details of that case, the case that it was based on, which was an appeal case, and the opinion of the court that was delivered, and what the original state convictions were that brought about this case in the first place, and also going through a description of the actual event that took place. That's the subject of the complaint, because I just think that the details are really interesting. So let's kick it off. So Prince versus Massachusetts. In 1944, the U.S. Supreme Court sustained convictions of the state of Massachusetts against Sarah Prince for violation of child labor laws, recognizing that religious rights are not beyond limitation when it comes to the safety and welfare of children. Prince versus Massachusetts. Yep.
Before you do that, though, Mirriam, do you want to tell a little bit about, I know it's Prince versus Massachusetts and they're talking about the Supreme Court, but what it really entails? So it goes against the First Amendment, and the First Amendment includes the freedom of religion and the freedom of speech. And right, those were so the First Amendment is really where this was located in.
That's absolutely correct. So the argument by the person that was appealing the conviction, and I'll go through that in detail, but it was in regard to religious rights. So we had this clashing of the laws that are in place to protect children, and in particular, this was in regards to child labor laws, and the rights of the parents or the rights of the family, or the rights of everyone to practice their religious beliefs. And so that's why it's a really relevant citation for the Scientology stuff, because Scientology, they have the religious status, particularly in the US. And that's always their argument, is that, well, we're a religion, and so this is religious rights, da 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 da, right? But actually, in regards to children, that's different. And this case really, really does represent that. Where, and I'll take you through it, but yeah, so I don't want to kind of jump ahead too much, but this is the core of the argument, Mona, and that's really great to point that out and how that is relevant and how that relates back to Scientology. Okay, so it was in 1944. Sarah Prince was appealing convictions for violating Massachusetts child labor laws, claiming the acts to be a rightful exercise of her religious convictions. When the offenses were committed, Prince was the aunt and custodian of Betty M. Simmons, a girl 9 years of age. The event, which is the subject of the complaints, is described as follows. Mrs. Prince, living in Brockton, is the mother of 2 young sons. She also has legal custody of Betty Simmons, who lives with them. The children, too, are Jehovah's Witnesses, and both Mrs. Prince and Betty testified they were ordained ministers. The former, like how a 9-year-old girl could be an ordained minister is a whole nother topic, but what they are saying is that we're Jehovah's Witnesses, we are ministers, etc. This is our right to practice religion. Mrs. Prince was accustomed to going each week on the streets of Brockton to distribute Watchtower and Constellation according to the usual plan, which is the publications for the Jehovah's Witnesses. That evening, as Mrs. Prince was preparing to leave her home, the children asked to go. She at first refused. Childlike, they resorted to tears, and mother-like, she yielded. So I just wanted to point that out, that the children wanted to go with her, right? So it's not a case of like the children weren't willing or that they were forced to do this or anything like that. They begged her. I really want, no, don't leave us. We want to go. Okay. So she takes them with her. Arriving downtown, Mrs. Prince permitted the children to engage in the preaching work with her upon the sidewalks. That is, with specific reference to Betty, she and Mrs. Prince took positions about 20 feet apart near a street intersection. Betty held up in her hand for passers-by to see copies of Watchtower and Consolation. No one accepted a copy from Betty that evening, and she received no money, nor did her aunt, but on other occasions Betty had received funds and given out copies. So for the incident that was in question or the subject of the complaint, she didn't receive any money for it, as in she wasn't paid for her labor, and neither was the aunt. Mrs. Prince and Betty remained until 8:45 p.m. A few minutes before this, Mr. Perkins, the school attendance officer, which would be, I guess, the school attendance officer for that area, approached Mrs. Prince. A discussion ensued. He inquired, and she refused to give Betty's name. However, obviously he was wanting to check the records. Is she registered to a school? Where was she? However, she stated the child attended the Shaw School. Mr. Perkins referred to his previous warnings and said he would allow 5 minutes for them to get off the street. Mrs. Perkins admitted she supplied Betty with the magazines and said, "Neither you nor anybody else can stop me. This child is exercising her God-given right and her constitutional right to preach the gospel, and no creature has a right to interfere with God's commands." The Supreme Court upheld 2 of the 3 convictions of the state. The opinion of the court asserts that the family itself is not beyond regulation in the public interest, as against a claim of religious liberty, and that neither rights of religion nor rights of parenthood are beyond limitation. Acting to guard the general interest in youth's well-being, the state may restrict the parent's control by requiring school attendance, regulating or prohibiting the child's labor, and in many other ways. Its authority is not nullified merely because the parent grounds his claim to control the child's course of conduct on religion or conscience. I've still got more slides, but at this stage, like, what's your thoughts on it?
That it's very similar to what we were talking about the last time about the Department of Labor child standards for labor, and that had really meritorious grounds to say that a child under the age of 14 shouldn't be working, and a parent shouldn't be slaving their child just because of their religious beliefs. So very in line with what we were talking about.
That's a really good point, that the child labor law, the standards that are set in there are still applicable in no matter what setting, really. And that there isn't any protection of any kind of rights that is going to override the protection of children, particularly when there's very clear laws in regards to their labor. And I feel like this Prince versus Massachusetts, I feel like it's a great argument to be using in courts, like in Scientology cases. Now, anyways, we could get off track and talk about at the point that they become an adult, then they're making adult choices, right? So I think, that's a whole nother topic.
But I think it's since it's been so long from the Supreme Court decision of 1944 that I think people feel that it's so old that it's just not applicable anymore, but yet it applies to everyday situations today.
Well, it absolutely does, Mona. And like similarly, so we have the High Court in Australia, and it doesn't matter at what year that decision, it's if you have, obviously if a decision then later on then contravenes that decision, obviously the more recent decision is the one that's going to be, the most relevant, right? But the decision that turned Scientology into a religion or accepted Scientology as a religion in Australia was a decision by the High Court. So whatever opinion that they stated, they stated that essentially that it was a religion. And so from that, then that High Court ruling, once that was established in Australia, they then used that in other countries, like across the Commonwealth and then across all these other countries, to just one by one say, well, the High Court of Australia ruled that, Scientology is a religion. See how, and that's insane. So, but yeah, so even I think there hasn't been a ruling that then changes this. And this is very common sense. Of course, that makes sense. The other thing as well, to know how commonly agreed upon this concept is that the UN, which created the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which has been accepted by every country except for the US. So every country in the world has agreed that these are the rights that are agreed upon for children. In there it says that the child's well-being is prioritized above absolutely everything else. And even in there, they do have the right, they do have the right to their own religion. They have the right to have a say in the things that affect them. They have the right, they have all these rights, but the overlapping, the highest of priority is their well-being. In other words, even if the child has a right to their religious beliefs and practices, if it's going to affect their well-being, then the well-being is the thing that is prioritized. Do you see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. In that way, even though the US doesn't have the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, hasn't accepted that, they still have something in place like this, which is essentially saying the same thing in regards to the laws versus, or the rights versus type of thing. You know what I'm saying?
Is that what it's called? Is the UN's Convention
on the Rights of the Child?
On the Rights of the Child? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to write that down. So while you're talking.
Yeah, it's a really good one because like you're talking about a global agreement of law essentially. Not law in the sense of well, here's the thing. Then law is based on that. So for example, family courts in Australia rulings are based on literally based on the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. And Australia ratified that, as to say they accepted those rights in 1990. Since 1990 onwards, all the decisions in family court are based on the best interests of the child. So, and that comes directly from the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. There's also the
Okay.
recent laws, which is a subject for another time. But, or if we get time, we'll touch on it maybe at the end of this. The recent laws in Australia on child safety are based on the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. So it's really, really important. So, in other words, there is a global agreement that when it comes to the protection of children, that is the highest priority, not rights. There is no allowance for abuse of children in the name of religion. The world has agreed that that's not okay. And there are laws set up to protect children where there are violations of those laws. While you're doing that, Mona, I'll keep reading through this.
Okay.
Yep. So this is the from the opinion of the court for this ruling. The state's authority over children's activities is broader than over like actions of adults. So, in other words, the state can restrict the activities of children, and maybe not to the same degree as adults, whereas because adults can make adult choices. This is particularly true of public activities and in matters of employment. A democratic society rests, for its continuance, upon the healthy, well-rounded growth of young people into full maturity as citizens, with all that implies. It may secure this against impeding restraints and dangers within a broad range of selection. Among evils most appropriate for such action are the crippling effects of child employment. It's stating how important that intervention is. And so the ruling is summarized as parents may be free to become martyrs themselves, but it does not follow that they are free to make martyrs of their children before they have reached the age of full and legal discretion. In other words, consent, the age of consent, when we talk about kids cannot consent. So it does not follow that they are free to make martyrs of their children before they have reached the age of full and legal discretion, when they can make that choice for themselves. So, yeah, I just thought that's really, really important. Yeah, do you have any final thoughts on that, Mona? Before we move on to the next one? Oh no, I think, is Mona frozen? Mona, come back to me. See, she's gonna try and come back. Okay. So, I don't know. I'm just gonna check if anybody had any comments that they had about that. Oh wow. Okay. So Aussie, oi oi oi, Marie says Mirriam, 14 cult leaders were charged with child endangerment last week in Australia. Huh. I'm gonna write that down because I want to have a look into that. Or do you want to just send me a link or anything like that? You can send it to againstthedarkarts@gmail.com. But I'm gonna make a note of that anyways. 14 cult leaders. Okay, super interesting. I want to know the details of that case. Let's see what else. Okay, so Amanda Beaumont, what the UN Let me add, sorry, I'm gonna add Mona back.
Sorry, guys.
Hiya.
Elon Musk did
That's
it again. My internet went down.
Well, welcome back. So glad that you're able to get back in. I was just reading through some of the comments. So this one is Amanda Beaumont. What the UNCRC does define, which is the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, defines the rights of children and the responsibilities of governments, ensures that children's rights are upheld regardless of their race, gender, religion, disability, or economic. Yep. That makes sense. Also sets out what children need to have a safe, happy, and fulfilled childhood, includes the right to food, shelter, clean water, safety, education, and healthcare. Absolutely. So, yes, it's a balancing of empowering children and also protecting them, because we want them to be able to develop well and survive well, and set a standard, an equal standard for everybody, to say, no, all the children have the right to have these things, because, yeah, and another thing in there, so, yeah, a lot of this, as I mentioned before, like the family court uses this a lot, because it is a really important sort of like guideline of how the courts can make their rulings. So it can inform the court on how to make rulings. And that also, it's really focused on the child needs. Child needs, as well as empowering them with their rights, and finding out where that balance is as well. But it's all about the best interests of the child. So it's the child's well-being is the core focus. And that's the central point through which, the lens through which everything can be looked at through, if that makes sense. Yeah.
It does. And there isn't a distinction when you're looking at the pursuit of love, life, and happiness, and pursuit of an education, and the promise of opportunity, equal opportunity. That doesn't mean over 18.
Mm-hmm.
That means everybody. That means all residents, all citizens.
Mm-hmm. Um, I was just going to add this as well from Amanda. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, UNCRC, is a treaty that establishes rights for children worldwide. It was adopted in 1989 and applies to all children under 18 years. Yes, so, it was adopted by the United Nations as a formal charter, and then sort of one by one, each country over the years has then ratified it for their country. So for Australia, it was 1990. But it's incredibly important. And yeah, it just basically sets the, the minimum standards, I think, for children. That then laws can be based on that, and decisions can be based on that, and provides an equal setting for children. Ophelia, because kids can't consent, they can't make decisions for themselves, and adults and governments are responsible for their well-being. Absolutely. The kids cannot fend for themselves. They cannot stand up to, methods of control, especially exerted by power. And so, yeah, it's the adults. We're responsible for their survival. We're responsible for the care and healthy development of children. Yeah.
It is, and that's our job. And unfortunately, that doesn't always, they don't always do their jobs well, as some parents don't.
And that's true. And then that's where, yeah, you're absolutely correct. But also as well, so then that can be, obviously there's extremes of that. There's extremes of that as well. There's a spectrum of that too. And I think that, it can provide the guidelines, like for certain settings as well, like in schools, for example. So my children are in public school here in Australia, and they have been taught this even just through the school as well, which I think that's really important. So teaching the children their rights as well is incredible. But yeah, so yeah, I think it's just an amazing thing that I think needs to sort of like be repeated and repeated. Now, you guys in the U.S. Don't have this. The U.S. has not accepted this convention. However, you do have laws, basically because the U.S. wants to remain independent, and they don't want any sort of overarching like controls of other countries or organizations, right? Which is fair enough. However, what is in place is there are various laws across state and federal laws that are designed around the protection of children. And that's why I say this 1944 Prince versus Massachusetts is still incredibly valid and relevant, even though it was so many years ago, because it does state that line really, really clearly in the sand, in my opinion. All right, so I was going to go to... Right, so one of the things that the U.S. does have in place is there are laws around the protection of children, and a topic that came up recently, which is a really important topic, is clergy members, and also, so this is different state by state, but more and more are adding in clergy members. There was a recent, I think it was it's the state of Washington. So yeah, the state of Washington recently added clergy members as well. And then there are, so some states, I believe, will, mandatory reporting is like, regardless if it was in a confession, other states might say, well, in the confession scenario, that's protected, but anything else outside the confession scenario isn't protected and must be reported. But, just to introduce this, so we're going to focus on California. In 1997, a statute was enacted to include clergy members and any custodian of records of a clergy member as mandatory reporters in the state of California. And then I was going to show you... Oh, where's my other thing? Okay. Add. Oh, I've got to remove that? Okay. And then add... Okay. So child abuse and neglect in California. Just going to read a bit of this here. Introduction. The abuse and neglect of children is a serious problem in California as well as in the nation as a whole. In 1994, there were over 664,000 reports of child abuse and neglect and about 90,000 children in foster care in California. What I wanted to tell you is, okay, what is child abuse and neglect? State law defines child abuse as 1, physical injury inflicted on a child by another person, 2, sexual abuse, or 3, emotional abuse. Child neglect is defined as negligent treatment which threatens the child's health or welfare. The different types of child abuse neglect can be categorized as follows. Sexual abuse is the victimization of a child by sexual activities, including molestation, indecent exposure, fondling, rape, and incest. Physical abuse is bodily injury inflicted by other than accidental means on a child, including willful cruelty, unjustifiable punishment, or corporal punishment. Emotional abuse is non-physical mistreatment resulting in disturbed behavior by the child, such as severe withdrawal or hyperactivity. Emotional abuse includes willfully causing any child to suffer. Willfully causing any child to suffer. It was like literally was my childhood in Scientology. Inflicting mental suffering, again, yes, tick, or endangering a child's emotional well-being. Yes, absolutely. General neglect is the negligent failure of a parent, guardian, or caretaker to provide adequate food, clothing, shelter, or supervision where no physical injury to the child has occurred. Severe neglect refers to those situations of neglect where the child's health is endangered, including severe malnutrition. Exploitation means forcing or coercing a child into performing activities that are beyond the child's capabilities or which are illegal or degrading, including sexual exploitation. Mona, I was just going to say, actually, when we, yeah, it's hard sometimes when, yeah,
That's okay. So let me, while you're thinking,
yeah.
back in the day, up until this, I think 23 or 24, the statute of limitations on child abuse was the 1 year and 3 year for criminal cases, not for civil cases, but for criminal cases. For the statute of limitations for the DA or the state's attorney um, to charge you with a crime if you were to injure a child or emotionally damage a child or neglect. And it has
Mm.
changed in 23 or 24 to there are no more statute of limitations.
Oh,
California was one of the
wow.
states that revoked all statute of limitations for child abuse. Yay!
So for case, that's incredible. That's amazing and so necessary. And so, do you know from what year that applies? Like, if incidents occurring from
2023.
such, so from okay,
2023. Yeah.
occurring 2023, and do you know if there was a look back window specifically for like child abuse, neglect, or no, they didn't end up doing that?
I can't answer that. I didn't look.
Yeah. That's all right. That would be interesting. But I'm glad to hear that. So from 2023 onwards, there is no for incidents occurring from 2023 onwards, there is no statute of limitations in place for childhood abuse and neglect within California. That's what you're
Correct.
saying.
Correct.
That's amazing. That is
That's
amazing and
it's an
so
incredible
necessary.
change. Yeah, it's an incredible change. Too bad it wasn't always like that, but it is an incredible
Mm.
change.
Well, thank you so much for adding that piece in there. That's really important. Obviously, it does take, like, particularly in groups as well, and particularly ones that have, there's power, dominance, control, there's psychological things, there's like there's a ton of things that are at play. It's going to take you so many years to be able to like figure those things out, be in a position where you feel safe enough to do something about it, etc. Like there is such a long runway to getting to be in a position where you can do something about it. Yeah. So,
Well, the one thing is like the 1 in 3 year statute of limitations on abuse or emotional neglect, emotional abuse, is it's
mm,
from when it was discovered, not when it happened.
yes, that's important.
So that's huge. So if you were 45 and just discovered through therapy that you really were emotionally abused or you had child abuse, then that's when the statute
Right.
of limitations would start. It's very confusing, isn't it?
Very confusing, but that makes a ton of sense. That it would be, at the time of discovery of when you discovered it, because
Hmm.
oftentimes, well, another thing as well is that abuse, if especially if it's repeated abuse, especially if it occurred during childhood, because you don't have a point of reference, it can become so normalized and can be difficult for the person that's experiencing it, especially as a child, to recognize
Yeah.
what's happened, and especially if they didn't have access to education or law and those sorts of things. So that's really important. Okay, so what I was going to mention before, I kind of like just it's hard. Okay, but actually this is relevant to this point too. What I was going to say is that it's hard sometimes because you're like looking at things, and all of a sudden something will just kind of like poke you. Like it's like sometimes it's hard to read the things because it's not. I'm reacting inside. Do you know what I mean? Because of my experiences. So when I see something, I'm like, oh, that happened to me as a kid. Like, anyways, one of the things that like when we talked about the UNOY case, um That's another hard one because there are so many correlating factors. And when I was just like touching on it the last time that we spoke, and I just pointed out a few things on it, and you said, and I said, cleansing that's mentioned in the complaints was that the children had to go through like cleansing, where they did colonics and that sort of thing. And I was like, oh well, they didn't, in order to like keep their weight and da da da. And I was like, oh, there's I don't think that applies to Scientology. And you said, oh, what about the Purif? And it's like, that was just another thing that just kind of hit me in the moment that I kind of didn't process, looking at that. And I don't know why it's making me really emotional, but I know that there's so many kids going through that, like even today. You have to stay in the sauna. You have to do 5 hours a day in the sauna. And you have to take, every day your niacin is going up. So increasing amounts of niacin. Anyways, it was just like that idea that like, you're never pure enough. I don't know why I'm so emotional. I'm so sorry, guys. But it's like, as a kid, like, you're never pure enough. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, I'm sorry. Like,
you're just not good enough. You don't feel good enough. Like you're dirty inside. Yeah, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, so whether it's like physically, you have to be cleansed. You have to do a purification rundown to get all the impurities out of you. Like, but that's physically, but then like mentally you're also impure. Oh my God, I don't know why I'm getting so upset. I'm so sorry, guys. I didn't expect this, but like, it happens so early on. You're like trying to control your own thoughts because you don't even want to have a thought that's incorrect. And I think it was just the realization of like, not one part of you was ever accepted or loved or like, yeah.
It's okay, Mirriam. It's all right. You're gonna get me crying.
So I guess sometimes, I'm sorry, I'm like, God, I'm a mess. But like, I guess sometimes like, I'm always looking at these and I'm kind of reading them like, so kind of like matter of factly. And then sometimes you'll see something and it'll just like, that happened.
Like a ton of bricks.
That was your, yeah. And that was your experience, and not just you, but so many children. And I even see like, like even in the last, even just recently seeing like, particularly in Los Angeles, because that's where I grew up. And my childhood, like majority of my childhood experiences in Scientology was there. And I see like them promoting these services, like particularly and very openly targeting children. And they have photos of children in the saunas, and yeah, it's hard. So, okay. Sorry.
It's okay.
So yeah,
That's
when
all
you
right.
said
we're here.
Yeah, so that was when we spoke a couple of weeks ago, and like when you said that, you're like, oh, what about the Purif? And I was like, like, I just didn't see that when I read it, and then just like, yeah.
Yeah, and how normalized they groomed you. How that was just normal. That was an everyday practice. What's wrong with that? Like with the UNLI. Oh, you'll just go get colonics once a week. We'll just flush all the crap out of you. We'll just push you all that niacin, and we're gonna stream your body with poison, so that way it gets rid of it, and it's gonna clear your mind, and it's gonna get all the poison out of your mind. Well, what was so wrong with me that you needed to get rid of the poison out of my mind?
And that's exactly right, Mona. And like Scientology does that to your mind with Dianetics. It says your mind, we need to cleanse your mind. We need to make you clear. It does that through Scientology practices. We need to make your soul, we need to get these impurities out of your soul. And it does that to your body by putting you through a purification rundown. I mean, there's plenty of people out there who have been through that like a few times. And it does start as early as children. So, like, where do you escape the abuse? You don't get to escape it on any level. I guess that was the realization and the point I was trying to make.
Thank you for trusting us with your feelings, Mirriam. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, guys. Okay. Yes, I just wanted to share this one. Oh, sorry. We were constantly told we were horrible and blamed for our own abuse, so that's true as well. I appreciate you guys being here. Okay, so what I want to talk about, is mandatory reporting. A mandated reporter includes a clergy member and any custodian of records of a clergy member. So this means a priest, minister, rabbi, religious practitioner, or similar functionary of a church, temple, or recognized denomination or organization.
Can
so
we
it's
break
not
that down just a little bit?
Yes.
Okay.
What I was going to say is that it's not just the clergy member, but it's also anybody who is handling the records of that. Do you want to talk about that for a bit? And then I can relate it back to Scientology. How about that?
Absolutely. So
Okay.
when you're dealing with a penitent person, let's say a priest or a clergy member, and you go in for a confession, let's say in the Catholic Church, I'm just going to give that as an example, and you go in as a confession, what you're truly doing is the priest or the clergy member is acting in the place of a supreme being, God. And so you're confessing your sins to that person in place of the supreme being or God. So that gives you penitent rights to where they're not going to go tell everybody, because you're really not telling that person, you're telling God. Okay, that sounds strange for if you're not in part of it, but that's
Okay.
what that is for. If that same priest, rabbi, clergy member is sitting at their desk and you go and you're chatting and you're talking about how you probably beat the heck out of your child or SA or something like that, that is not privileged information. And if you go in for counseling, that is not privileged clergy penitent information. Anybody reading those folders, the PC folders, or reading your studies, or the secretary, or anybody else that gets a hold of that information, that's not privileged information. Those are mandated reporters. If they see that information, they have to tell. And it's not in California, it's not just verbally, it's you have to give a written report of what you've seen. That's what a mandated reporter must do under law in California.
Wow. Um, it's amazing because let me tell you, when I was in Scientology, we never heard about this thing called mandated reporting. And yet in California, it's been in place for clergy members and the custodian of their records since 1997. And that was, the time that I was there, up until, into the early 2000s. So in Scientology, ministers, which is the clergy members, are those trained to deliver Scientology ceremonies and other spiritual counseling, and they are referred to as ministers. It is a prerequisite for permanent certification as an auditor to become an ordained minister. But one does not need to have this certification to become officially ordained in the Church of Scientology. So in other words, to be an auditor, you need to be an ordained minister. So there's a specific course for that, and then and then you're official.
So
Now
out of
we talked
curiosity,
about
when did
this.
they start that?
Yeah. Um, when did they start that? Well, I all I can say is that so 1998 was when I was in like the training area. So I was being trained to be an auditor, and I do remember it being around then because I remember not. I guess when we were all starting the training because we all started together, and then people kind of moved up ahead through the auditor training. And advanced. And once they would get to like the later advanced auditor training, all I can say is that I remember like one or two people doing that ordained minister course, but I don't recall it as being like an absolute requirement. But also I didn't train up to the levels that they were at. So I don't know, I guess is what I'm saying. In terms of whether within the internal core, like within the C organization, whether there is a requirement for an auditor, a qualified auditor, to get the ordained minister certification. But they are saying this publicly, and I would assume that, right, so I would assume that members of the public or people that are in like the staff orgs, like as in not Sea Org, would be required to adhere to this. I just don't know if that applies to all auditors within the Sea Org. But maybe it does, and that's what they're saying.
I know the answer to this, but if you would answer this from then and maybe now. Can you be under 18 and be an auditor?
Oh, yeah. So, well, when I was there, there was a ton of kids who were auditors. 100%.
Okay, and do you know now? Do you know anybody under the radar now that could tell us if there are auditors under 18?
I could maybe ask the question. I really don't associate with, or I'm not in contact with people who are under the radar. Let me just say that. Because I think it's difficult because our values are so different. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So, and also I am definitely like a declared suppressive person. So there's no doubt about that.
That's true. My thought process on that is because, and I think we talked a little bit about this the last time, and maybe not, I can't remember, but in order to be a mandated reporter, did I lose internet? Hold on.
No, I got you. I can still hear you.
Sorry about that. To be a mandated reporter, you have to be 18. And an ordained minister
right, that's right. You did mention that. Yes.
So
yes.
I think Scientology is the master of circular logic, and it drives me absolutely freaking crazy. But
100% they are. Yeah, 100%. Okay, but this is why I wanted to okay, so that would depend on, okay, are they an ordained minister, blah blah blah, technically, whatever. Maybe there's a fine line there. I think we can safely say that based on this, we can assume that most auditors would have to do this, right?
Right. And the new law that just came out about mandated reporters there must be 2 mandated reporters when auditing is happening. This new law must be 2 mandated reporters. Now it doesn't say in the room. So it could be 2 mandated reporters in the building, but there has to be 2 mandated reporters for religious services such as auditing and courses.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Okay, but like, okay, well let's go further, because there is a role in Scientology that is absolutely, inarguably, comes under this, is a member of the clergy, is an ordained minister, because the chaplain does all the ministerial services for an organization, as in they will host like the Sunday service, they will do official ceremonies, stuff like that. So the chaplain, this is the definition by Scientology, is an official position. This is the person who conducts, it says Sunday services here. Sunday services and presides at official ceremonies. But the chaplain also ministers to Scientologists on a more personal level. This is the key thing. Indeed, it is well known within the Scientology community that if there is some personal difficulty threatening one's life or one's family or one's spiritual progress, the chaplain is always available for counseling and guidance. Now, this is important because the chaplain continually appears in these cases where there is, well, for example, the chaplain is present in the cases of in the Danny Masterson case that the victims, so two of them had involvement with the chaplain in regards to Danny Masterson. Jane Doe 2 had involvement with the chaplain on a prior rape with somebody else, not Danny Masterson. That experience led her to not then go back to the chaplain because of the previous experience that she had, which relates like very similarly to how the other Jane Does experienced this chaplain in this role. And I wanted to show you guys as well. This is an article on slate.com. And this is an article that did... Sorry, what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit out of some of these things so I don't have as many tabs open. Okay, so this is Mike Rinder. I'll show you this. So this is a Slate article. An ex-Scientologist explains the Danny Masterson trial and how Scientology got desperate. And this is during... So this is November 2022. This is during the first, or around the time of the first trial of Danny Masterson, that resulted in a mistrial. And it's interesting to note that Mike Rinder, I can't find any record of Mike Rinder talking about this publicly, about this particular subject, until this first trial of Danny Masterson, and also resulting from the second trial of Danny Masterson. So that's interesting. Only from 2022 onwards does he actually talk about this, that I have been able to find. So he says here, if you have someone that's accusing someone of being a pedophile or a rapist inside Scientology, their first inclination, if that person is a Scientologist, is not to go to law enforcement, but to go to Scientology, to what is called the Office of Special Affairs, which is what I used to be the head of, and report it. Then efforts to deal with this situation inside the Scientology bubble go into full effect, and that means rounding up anybody else that knows anything about it or may have seen something, and making sure that they are keeping everything inside the bubble of Scientology and not going off and talking about it to inappropriate people or thinking that they have to make a report outside of the organization. You're required to report inside the organization, but discouraged from reporting outside the organization. So when somebody has... so going back to what Scientology described the chaplain, like, so when someone has a complaint or something really serious in their life that they're trying to address, they go to the chaplain, and the chaplain is a way of hearing a complaint and preventing the person from taking it out into the legal system. So their job is actually to report, to prevent reporting or prevent cases. In fact, they handle like divorces and like almost like their own family court, rather than allowing Scientology parents to go out into family court. But the Office of Special Affairs, which is the sort of overriding network that covers up all the crimes in Scientology, they have a line to the chaplain, as in they have like a channel to the chaplain, and that goes both ways. The chaplain will make reports to the Office of Special Affairs, and the Office of Special Affairs will give them a command or require them to, like, a course of actions of what they're supposed to do. That could be trying to persuade somebody to sign an agreement, that sort of thing. But the goal is to keep it quiet and keep it in-house. And so the chaplain will then, make the person go through different handlings or whatever and try and negotiate it and try and basically prevent that person from reporting it outside. The chaplain appears in many cases that have come out, that have resulted in convictions. And so for example, anyways, there's quite a few, but I don't want to get too off into the weeds. I guess any thoughts on that, Mona, before I move on to what I want to show you next?
Nope, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So the next thing I wanted to show you is this one. So Introduction to Scientology Ethics. So this is a video with Mike Rinder, Leah Remini. It's titled "How Scientology Covers Up Crimes." They did this video after Danny Masterson was convicted, and I believe after he was sentenced. They then in 2023, end of 2023, yeah. And so this is, and I just want to point out here, what they have on the screen here is, this is the Scientology, like, procedures. And this is, they have their own set of law, like what they describe as like high crimes, which are like the most punishable things. And the one of them is reporting or threatening to report Scientology or Scientologists to civil authorities in an effort to suppress Scientology or Scientologists from practicing or receiving standard Scientology. So for Scientologists, we would understand that to mean that you're not allowed to report to external authorities any Scientologist. And that was a core understanding, that even all the children knew. You know what I mean? So, and I just wanted to play you a little bit of how, like, Mike Rinder is going to describe exactly how this kind of gets implemented.
This, because when we talk about...
Can you guys hear that okay as well? Oh.
I think so. I can hear it pretty well.
Okay, perfect. Okay, here we go. Oops, hang on. Here we go, and play.
Now, I wanted to ask you, and I wanted you to explain, when somebody is accused of a horrific crime in Scientology from OSA, what is immediately done? What is the procedure of when a crime is known about in Scientology with Scientologists involved?
First, to shut down anybody else that knows about it, prevent them from talking to anyone. Like,
so you let the person know, you pull them in through Julian Schwartz or some kind of Shane Woodruff or the chaplains or the ethics officers.
Or Kirsten Catano in the Office of Special Affairs, or whoever happens to be. And the first thing is, you tell the person is instructed, do not speak about this with anybody, nobody.
So you're not allowed to talk to your Scientology parents, your husband, your wife, nobody.
Nope.
So I'm just going to play that bit again. Sorry.
Thousands, if not hundreds or millions of dollars from them.
Oh, no, it's not there.
So you let the person know, you pull them in back before we do this. Because when we talk about, I wanted to ask you, and I wanted you to explain, when somebody is accused of a horrific crime in Scientology from OSA, what is immediately done? What is the procedure of when a crime is known about in Scientology with Scientologists involved?
First, to shut down anybody else that knows about it, prevent them from talking to anyone. Like,
so you let the person know, you pull them in through Julian Schwartz or some kind of Shane Woodruff or the chaplains or the ethics officer.
So the chaplain. So I just wanted to pause it there because, like, we've pointed out that the chaplain absolutely is a mandated reporter. There is absolutely no gray area because they are an ordained minister. They are delivering the services, ministering the services of the religion. And so here we have them saying that part of this system of cover-up, the chaplain is a tool in that toolbox. So the chaplain is part of that system. And the other thing, Mona, that you had pointed out as well when we were talking before is that it's not just the clergy member, but it's the custodian of the records as well. So in other words,
Right.
it's anybody handling, anybody seeing those reports. And absolutely, we know in Scientology, like everything is written down. There are just reports for days, and so yes. The other thing as well is there's a thing called the chaplain's court, which again you're having witnesses with these situations, and so they are handling the records, they're handling the reports, they are also mandated reporters. But you see in Scientology, like literally they're using the chaplain not to report externally, but actually as the method of keeping it internally.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that insane?
It's very insane.
Yeah.
And
Crazy.
when you go to their policy or you go to their documents, even on the website, they talk about that the chaplain is the one that reports it to the authorities and encourages those that are to report to the authorities. And they really don't. They do 100% the opposite.
100% the opposite. And it's insane. Okay, so I just want to play a little bit more of that.
There's
Or
Or
Kirsten
just-
Catano in the Office of Special Affairs, or whoever happens to be. And the first thing is you tell the person is instructed, do not speak about this with anybody, nobody.
So you're not allowed to talk to your Scientology parents, your husband, your wife, nobody.
Nope.
Okay.
And then the next step is who already knows about it. And then they are all pulled in to make sure they don't say anything to anybody else. Like contain it in a cone of silence is the first step.
Okay. And so just
A cone of silence. Does that say mandatory reporting or just like, oh my gosh. Okay.
step just to go a little bit off that step. I think like a subproduct of that is, do you then tell, let's say I told my mother that something happened to me. Do then OSA and Sea Org members tell my mother that that wasn't true, that didn't happen, that I need handling, that something's wrong with me?
So it's obviously it sort of depends on what you're told, Leah. But
Okay.
generally, if it was something that was very incriminating, the general thing would be, look, you don't have all the data. Like
Right.
it's a way of saying a way of saying that's not true.
It puts the doubt in the minds of because that's what you.
So not only are they going to be sort of managing you, keeping you quiet, they're going to be also controlling any advocacy, any advocates that you might have had access to that might know. They're also going to swing into action to control, to mitigate that situation as well.
Julian
Totally
did with my
control
mom. He
the
made her
storyline.
start to wonder
Yeah.
if what I was telling her was true. He was like, your daughter hasn't given you all the information.
Yeah, and see, not even that, but also attempting to discredit them, to be like, oh, well, you just don't know. Like, you don't know, you don't have all the information, so there's things that you're missing. So, you haven't got it right. Like, alluding that also the other person is at fault too, and like, yeah.
There's stuff that you don't know about,
Right.
that we're handling, because that's what happened with the Jane Does as well. All of their Scientology friends were called in, and those friends were told that they had said something different, that they were taking responsibility, like they were told lies.
So I'm just going to add in here as well as like, obviously they're talking about this in light of the Danny Masterson conviction and sentencing at that time. But they are talking about this same exact structure that is in place to prevent reporting about abuse and neglect of children is the same exact structure that's in place to protect pedophiles and rapists. It's the same system, the same methods, the same practices, the same policies. All of it applies.
Yes.
Yeah.
And usually, like I said, the first thing is, well, the easy answer is you don't have all the data. I do, but I can't tell you it. But believe me, this is being taken care of. You don't need to worry about it. You don't need to do or say anything about it. In fact, do not do or say anything about this.
The church is handling it.
The church is handling this.
Okay.
Scientology is dealing with it.
So I wanted to add another point there, is that they would say to a victim, oh, you don't need to report directly because like, so in the case of California, they would say, you know, because it was known that there was this relationship between Scientology and LAPD. In fact, when a crime had occurred, so there is a specific crime that I have in mind, which is there was a 12-year-old girl who was raped on what is now called L. Ron Hubbard Way. And it was at 4 a.m. and she was working at night and went to cross the road, like from the AOLA building to the other blue building. And she was raped by just like a stranger, whatever. And so, yeah, she was told that she didn't need to report to the police because in knowing that they already had a relationship with LAPD, like they were going to take care of it. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, where that safe pointing goes both ways. There's safe pointing of LAPD, but there's also the safe pointing of people who would report potentially to say like, oh, you don't need to do that. Like, we'll handle it directly with them. It's so scary, really.
And I'm not going to mention names, but there's another lady that was there when she was 13 at the Blue Building. Her mother lived nearby, but she was living there because it was easier to work, and they wanted her to sign up for the Sea Org, so that she was staying there. And she actually was taken from the Blue Building and essayed and pimped for a couple of days. And when she came back, the chaplain and said, oh, don't worry about it. We got it handled. We'll take care of it for you. Yeah, just exact same situation.
Wow, exact same. Horrible.
This, and it will be appropriately handled by the people whose job it is to handle this, and that's not you.
That's OSA.
That's OSA.
Okay, got it.
So this is how...
So let me just add another layer. So there's these different components that are at play. So like in terms of positions that are keeping things from going out and being reported, you know, you got the ethics officer, you've got the chaplain, you've got the Scientology lawyers, you've got the Office of Special Affairs is the overarching kind of network that directs and controls all those activities. But the other part, which we haven't really talked about a whole lot recently, which is because I think we're focusing, like, there's been a lot of focus on Danny Masters and etc. But there is the security department I haven't spoken a lot about security, but what I want to say, that's a whole nother topic to dive into, because security is run by OSA. Security is run by the Office of Special Affairs. So security does not do things that are not governed by the Office of Special Affairs. And security also has this relationship with LAPD. And then security is also doing that function of preventing people from reporting, because they are saying, and they appear official, right? And they're saying that, like, they'll say, oh, don't worry, like, yeah, we'll handle that for you directly with LAPD. You don't need to worry about that. Do you get what I'm saying? And so because there is that, we see them like side by side, and they're both wearing uniforms. They look official. They're working together all the time. Like, yeah, it's when you're a kid, you just think like, oh, the authorities are taking care of it. These two authorities have a relationship. You don't question it,
and you fear the authorities anyways, because you're taught to fear the authorities. So
yeah, so you would rather have your type of authority represent you, right? Rather than you having to put yourself at risk of dealing with that actual real authority that external authority yourself. So that feels like you're being, let's say that word again, safe pointing. You feel safe because you're like, oh, it's being taken care of, And that's what the security department does. That's what the chaplain does as well, is to instill that feeling of like, hey, I've got you. I'm looking after you. I've got your best interests in mind. That's what my job is. Really, their job is to service the best interests of the organization. And they do that under the direction of the Office of Special Affairs.
This is what gets done. Contain, contain, contain. Make sure that nobody else knows. Make sure nobody else is talking about it. If there's a bunch of people that already know, then every one of them has to be individually seen and shut down.
And they're all ordered by their church not to talk about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, we saw that, we've heard the story of what happened with the Burbank child facility and how that.
So before we just move on to the Burbank child facility, I just wanted to mention there, so I hope everybody understands and that it's very clear that in fact, when they're talking about people being shutting down in this silencing, it's also parents. Like, they are silencing parents in regards to crimes against children, against their own children. Like, just to really emphasize that. So I'm just play a bit more. So he's talking about the Burbank daycare case. And actually, let me just show you this real quick. So this is the underground bunker. Tony Ortega did an article a while back in regards to the Burbank daycare case. The only thing I really wanted to point out on this article, which is a really good article, and there's a couple of articles that he's done on this, but is I just wanted to point out here. So this is the ethics officer, Julian Swartz. He asked the mother to wait. He brings the daycare mom in. Daycare mom is the person who owned and ran the daycare. It was her son who had committed the offenses against the children. You're talking about babies, toddlers at the daycare. Multiple sexual offenses that he had committed against them. The daycare mom knew about it, never reported it to authorities. It went on, and then now Scientology's found out about. Julian, who's the ethics officer, he also brought in a Scientology chaplain and a man in a suit who was introduced as an attorney for the church. Okay, so all this, there's a lot of details to this case, but all this ultimately results in this being kind of shut down. But I just wanted to point to that to show you that, yeah, there's a Scientology chaplain in each one of those things. And you're talking about the harms against children, babies, toddlers. So what's a Scientology chaplain doing, being involved in the silencing of a mother? And there was several mothers, because there was several children who had been abused, who had been harmed. And so this Scientology chaplain is involved here yet again to prevent this from going further. So just to point that out. And
that went down, and the parents are all called in and don't say anything and don't cooperate with anybody. And, so they can't gather enough evidence to bring any credible charge. So they dodged the bullet.
Right. Except one. Right.
Right.
Yes. Anyway, and that wasn't.
So think about that for a sec. So they shut down all the parents. There was one mother, the mother who's the subject of these couple of articles that Tony Ortega wrote. She was the one at the time that was like, no, absolutely. Like, I'm absolutely going to take this further. All the other mothers, all the other parents had been silenced and had been convinced, like, no, don't bring any further action. Don't pursue any legal action. Don't pursue any criminal outcome or anything like that. Don't pursue justice with the external authorities. And that's a case where, again, like, it's several mothers, and even it's not just mothers, but it's, mothers and fathers, and you know what I mean? They're all being shut down. Now, let's say that case did end up in court. I think the thing is that there would be so much discovery that would be harmful to Scientology. Anyways, just, yeah, like, there's reasons why they want to shut these things down so that nothing gets examined. And, yeah.
Enough, and because they were babies,
They can't testify or say anything.
They can't speak on their own behalf. I don't even know if they know anything happened to them.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so then what happens, Mike?
Then the lawyers are contacted, depending on what the circumstances.
Okay, so this is a really good video to watch if anyone wants to know more about it. But I think for this topic, I think that's pretty good. Yeah, any thoughts on that, Mona?
No, it was pretty good. Pretty good cover for it. Yep.
Okay, cool. And, coming back to the topic of the chaplain again, this woman, her name is Lori Hodgson. This is from an interview that was done with Angry Gay Pope and Jeffrey Augustine. Now, I'm hoping that they'll issue like a re-edit of this, because this video, these interviews are they're broken down into parts, but this interview with this mother is absolutely incredible. The only thing is that they have these clips in between her statements that is like this crazy from some movie or show or something, I don't know. And so it's like, I wish that they would reissue this without these crazy things in it.
A little more edited. Yeah.
Yeah, like, it doesn't need anything. Like a parent's statement can stand on its own. But yeah, anyways, I guess they were trying to be like, I don't know, whatever it is. But I hope, please, if like they see this, please like reissue this. It's a really, really relevant interview. So I'm gonna like back it up a little bit. I guess don't know if I picked the right time stamp, but let's have a go.
Where I was taking classes at, and he was the one in charge of ethics. If you have a situation, you go to him, and he was also
I think I need to back it up a little bit more. Oh, yes, I do. Let's back it up to... Oop.
You're not dragging it. There you go.
She came back home, wanted to drop out of school and dedicate...
Okay, no, back it up a little bit more. So that's what I mean, this like...
Scientology in Los Gatos. Regular public school. And she was getting... about 15 and a half. And,
okay, sorry, I know where it is now. Thank you guys for your patience. Here we go.
Okay, my story started when my daughter turned 15. She was about 15 and a half. And, when she was younger, she went to a Scientology school. And then when she's about 14, she went into a regular public school. And she was getting straight A's and B's, and she wanted to be a veterinarian. And we were looking at colleges. And out of the blue, my ex-husband, Jim Leake, took her to a staff recruiting film. That she had to watch at Church of Scientology in Los Gatos.
Yeah, that is a little annoying, isn't it?
What's that?
So that is a little annoying, isn't it?
It's really annoying, and so it's hard to pick, like, okay, where's the next time stamp? I could have written them all down, but it's so broken up. Okay, we'll just give it a go.
Children, come and get your lollipops.
And after 3 hours being there, she came back home, wanted to drop out of school and dedicate her life to Scientology. All her dreams, all her goals, her education just was washed away. She said...
Well, what did she tell you?
She told me that I want to work for Scientology, and I went down there and I realized it's my purpose in my life. And I want to get my GED so I can get out of school as soon as I can. And she was 15 and a half. So I said, no, absolutely not. You can decide that when you're 18. And I fought this for 6 months. I was in counseling myself, some Scientology counseling. They took me off what I was doing and put me in, it's called security checking, where they would interrogate me and ask me who was the one who did not want her to join staff.
I don't trust a man who makes toys. Forbidden.
Stay in school.
Okay, so yeah, so I hope everyone understood that. Like, so they want to take her child from her and dedicate her entire life to Scientology for the next billion years. And she's like, no, my daughter she wanted to be a vet. Like, she's studying, she's doing great in school, and, you know, she has these goals and stuff. And they're like, okay, now you're going to be interrogated. The mother. So the person who is advocating for the child, in this case, is now being subjected to invasive interrogations by a religious, quote, religious organization. Just so everyone has that really clear, because it's fucking terrifying. Okay.
I want her to get an education. That's what's important. And she's too young to make this decision right now. I fought it for 6 months. They even, would pull in different people. They lied to me and had me go talk to a man named Pat Weiner, where I was taking classes at. And he was the one in charge of ethics. If you have a situation, you go to him, and he was also the mission holder at the time. And he said, I'm going to talk to you about this and help you. And he tricked me and had another person come in, and they made me go into the counseling. And it like betrayed my trust in him, because I thought I could talk to him for help, and let alone they put me in, it was like a lie detector. And they kept saying, is it your father? Is it your stepdad? Why? Who is the one who doesn't want Jessica to go on staff? Over and over again. And it was just awful, because I kept saying, it's me. And then they had me go to another area and go through that. This went on for months and months.
So all of this is designed to basically take your 15-and-a-half-year-old daughter and put her into a life of staff slave labor.
Right.
But they needed your consent.
And I would not agree.
And this is interesting, because the church wants you to change your mind.
Right.
They want your legal consent. Now, did they at any time threaten you with an SP declare at this point if you didn't cooperate?
Not at that point. What we did is they decided to put me in with a chaplain. He's the person who you talk to about family matters. And I was in the with the chaplain with my daughter, my ex-husband, myself, and the mission holder. Many times we would all meet. And they would have me read things like, what is the greatest good? And I'm like, for her to stay in school, I just would not agree. Well, finally we came to an agreement that she would drop out of her public school after she had one more semester, because I thought that would buy me some time so she could really figure this out.
Yeah. To me, it's just heartbreaking.
But they don't sign any of that under duress. No, I say sarcastically.
Right. Yeah, no, there's no coercion, intimidation. She's saying that you have several people that are like contacting her and setting up these different meetings, convincing her this, that, the other thing. It's and make no mistake about it, they're talking about, recruiting someone into the Sea Org. They trying to take this woman's child from her and convincing her that, yeah, if there's something wrong with her, or there's some other influence that is creating this situation, this resistance, that it's not just like her standing up for the protection of her child. But make no mistake that same scenario applies to a mother who is saying, I want to report this pedophile, or I want to report this child abuser who is a Scientologist. The same types of situation, the same type of thing, and the same people involved. The chaplain who, is supposed to be, reporting abuses is actually negotiating with the parent to back off and to not make this a problem, and to try and handle them by showing them oh, well, Hubbard said here that such and such, you just need to read this and understand it. Yeah, It's shocking. And yeah, that's all the things I was going to share with you that I had lined up, all my tabs on my screen. Yeah, I feel it makes me feel really sad. You know, that children in Scientology have been so unprotected, because even though there's these laws that say mandatory reporting, the people that you're told that you can go to in the organization are not actually going to help you, you know, get a legal resolution.
Correct. And it's like we were looking at the Section 506, or the new 506 law for California. And then I know Serge discovered that Florida, everyone is a mandated reporter, not just clergy, not just people handling the folders with custodial guard over the folders and the information. Every person in Florida is a mandated reporter. So if you go to supper and your waitress sees bruises, she's a mandated reporter.
Yeah.
If you go, you know, and I think that's the hardest part, is a mandated reporter feels they have to see bruises or casts or scratches or hair missing or something, you know, some type of neglect, lice, whatever. Is that it's hard to see the psychological damages
Yes.
that are happening to a child, but if you're getting strange questions or inappropriate, I'd rather have somebody say, "Can you do a welfare check?" rather than not. Especially,
And let
I
me
don't
say
know.
this, I would add this as well, Mona. I think that it might have been more difficult to detect. It's easier now because with knowledge, training, and like research base to make those observations off of. But I guess like for someone who isn't like psychologically trained, you know, it is part of the. Now, actually, I have a question. This is a question. It seems like it would follow that if someone is a mandated reporter, that they should be required to go through mandated reporter training, and in that training would list out, like would bullet point at least some of the indicators for a child being psychologically harmed. I guess that's, I don't know, that's a point, but sorry, you continue.
Well, but then you have to think that here's the conundrum. In Florida, if all adults are mandated reporters, do all adults have to take mandated reporter training? I don't think so.
Right.
I guess I've never seen that, to where when you get your driver's license in Florida, you have to take even an online mandated reporter. I'm not saying that's how it happens, but you know, when you become a resident, now you have to take this training. I've never heard of such thing. So how
It
do
seems
you?
like a huge missing step because, well,
Yeah.
so let's take the you know, a person that's in Scientology, for example. I mean, I never heard of the words mandatory reporter. I just had never heard of them when I was in Scientology, not the entire time that I was in it. And I, you know, okay, you can do the ordained minister course. Now you're actually by law mandated reporter, but you have no idea even what that is, or what your
Right.
requirements are, or what does that even look like. And also you're being told that abuse of children is actually normal. Putting them in a room and interrogating them, that's totally cool. That's totally okay. So and you don't have access to the law. So how can you don't even have a reference point to tell you that that's abuse. So there
You're
is
right.
this
You're right.
huge, right. It's this huge missing piece. It's like,
And
I
Amanda
mean,
has
it's
a
just
good
like the
point.
blind, right. It's like
Right.
the blind leading the blind in there. Oh, okay. Yeah. Put that up. But if a child finds a moment to say something to someone, then they have to report rather than thinking everyone needs to be trained.
That's a good
okay.
point.
Right.
Yeah.
That's their obligation. But I guess
Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is that in Scientology, there is already training that tells someone who is actually a mandated reporter that this is all just normal, this is not abuse, and don't you dare report to authorities. Like, how do you get inside these organizations that okay, this is a good point here. So in Florida, as a mandated reporter, I have never taken training. All I do is sign a piece of paper signing that I am a mandated reporter for my work. Right.
So you know the campaign, the human trafficking campaign, or the abuse campaign, where
Okay, sorry,
everybody.
I'm just going to pop this in. Sorry to interrupt you, but Amanda said I was expanding on the cafe situations.
Okay.
Maybe I missed something about cafes. Sorry, Amanda.
But, you know, maybe
But
a
thank
good
you.
thing.
No, it's good. It's all part of the conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's like, when they were doing the help me
Oh,
sign,
right.
just
I
something.
gotcha. Okay. Let me just go back to this. So, but if a child finds a moment to say something to someone, then they have to report rather than think everyone needs to be trained. So, yeah. So what she's saying is like in a public situation, if a child indicates to you like I've been abused, then you absolutely, it doesn't matter
Right.
what training you have to protect that child and you have to report it to authorities. Yeah. Very good point. Thank you. Thanks for that. Go on, Mona.
No, that's okay. I'm just, I'm wondering, what could be a next step on all of this, is because that's a great point, you guys, that if a child doesn't feel like they can go to the authorities, or if they can't report, or if they're groomed to think that it was normal rather than
Yeah.
abuse, um,
Right.
maybe to give more of a public service announcements about this is what
Yes.
child abuse or child neglect could look like, or if they're,
Yes.
just something to give clues to
I
people.
agree, Mona. Why isn't it? It should be absolute. The training should really be done in the public space by government. Like that's like what you're saying. I love that. So it doesn't require someone to take a course. If they can advertise it, across, and even if they can advertise it across YouTube, advertise it on TV, and have these clips of like this is what it looks like. Would be really, really helpful. I know in Australia, they do a ton of those. The government does a ton of those in regards to like domestic violence. I'm sure that there is stuff on child abuse. Yeah, they're pretty good with doing those sorts of things. So raising the public awareness is really, really important.
And then another thing Tina had brought up, thank you, Tina, for bringing up so many questions. There are no stupid questions, and it's wonderful listening to the questions. But
Yes,
about,
absolutely. And also, I just want to say, Amanda, please, you don't have to apologize. I'm sorry. I didn't get the context of what you were saying, but I really, really appreciate that input because it's a really important part of the conversation. Yeah.
absolutely. But what can kids do now? How would they be protected now, the children that are there, if they don't know to report, or if the mandated reporters aren't reporting in
Right.
lawsuits and in child investigation cases? Knowing these laws and knowing that the mandated reporters are supposed to be reporting, that'll help in the investigation claims. It may not help a child that's in there today unless
Good
there
point.
was different circumstances, but an investigation, or being able to have the CPS go kick down the door, who knows, but it gives more
Well,
authority.
right, absolutely. It gives a kind of framework to identify laws, right? Like it gives something solid, some black and white. And I guess we never know who's watching this video. There may be somebody who's watching this that's I don't know, that's come out in the last few years or whatever. And they have now learned that actually they do have a case. They may have learned that, oh, that's what happened to me. They may have learned that, oh, there was laws in place at that time that were violated. So, you know, I guess we're doing what we can to raise that awareness. And where there is really is the problem is that there isn't the intervention into these organizations. And so, and that's a major problem. Now, Australia has recently begun to address that issue, and there's now been a framework set up in Australia, and now that's being rolled out across different states in maybe slightly varying ways, but there is actually a standard. There's a child safety standard that has been set for Australia. And get this, like depending on what the particular state law is that's established or created, it allows the authorities to go into the organization and say, like, are you meeting these child safety requirements? If not, and it also covers psychological abuses within institutions, within religious institutions. So it solves that problem. So in my state of Victoria, there is a commission that is their job is to uphold and enforce these child safety standards. Now, we talked about the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. The child safety standards are based on the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. How cool is that? This is all, I'm telling you, this is all, right?
So
it's
generalized,
really, really cool.
yeah.
It's really, really cool because the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child upholds that the child's well-being is the utmost matter of priority. Utmost, even beyond the religious rights. They do have religious rights. However, their well-being is the most prioritized, their best interests for their development, psychologically, physically, etc. So that's incredibly amazing. So as of 2023 in Australia, there is this system now in place where authorities can actually intervene and they can actually go in to these organizations. So I've only just recently learned this a couple of days ago, and I posted it on my community tab. And I will be starting to be rolling out reports and demands for investigation and providing them with supportive information and breaking down these practices that are abusive to children. And so I've got a ton of work to do to inform these authorities. But I'm going to make that happen. I'm going to make that happen, and at least in my state of Victoria, that this gets addressed, that these abusive practices are, that children are not being subjected to these abusive practices.
That's excellent news. That's wonderful. Yeah. Before we close out, can I talk a little bit about the 2777?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, no, go for it.
Did you have a copy of that or no? It's okay. I can just read a little bit of it. But that was one of it's a new California, it's an old California law that the statute of limitations is being vacated right now. And I'm going to read it. It's a little bit complicated, but it's only a paragraph, so it's not that big of a deal.
Oh, I love that. Okay, fantastic.
Let me find it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to skip the history of it, but it's the sexual assault statute of limitations. In this bill, until December 31st, 2026, revive claims. So they're eliminating the statute of limitations. Revive claims seeking to recover damages suffered as a result of SA that occurred. This part of it is after January 1st, 2009. So there is a limit for that, but there's no statute of limitations for that. Mm-hmm. That would otherwise.
So in other words, right. So in other words, Mona, for any incidences, now this is for the state of California, we should say as well.
Yep.
So for any incidences which occurred from 2009 onwards for sexual assault, child sexual assault, there is no statute of limitations that you can pursue that in either criminally or civilly, I believe. Yeah.
So yes, for child and adult. And now the second part of that is this bill. Now this is huge because this doesn't have the 2009 claim. This bill would additionally revive claims seeking to recover damages suffered as a result of an SA that occurred on or after your 18th birthday, so this is for adults, when one or more entities are legally responsible for damages, or the entity or their agents engaged in a cover-up. So adults that were SA'd, statute of limitations is no statute of limitations. There's a vacation of that until December 31st, 2026. If your SA was covered up by your employer or organization.
Are you saying, Mona, you're saying that there isn't a limit on when the offenses occurred?
For the first part of it, yes. For the second part of it, if they were covered up, there's no 2009. The only issue is if you were an adult. So this did not cover children.
Okay.
This covers adults. So if you were SA'd after you were 18 and it was covered up by your employer or a responsible agent, the church, then your statute of limitations is vacated until the end of December 2026. Kind of like what they did with the other cases.
Yeah.
And this is where I got in hot water with quite a few people because they were saying I was being mean. And I'm not being mean. I'm just telling you, if you run into this situation, or if you're eligible, or if you call, take advantage of it. It's only till the end of 2026.
Yeah.
Statute of limitations is
right. And so we need to be repeating that over and over. I think with some of these things, Mona, it's like it doesn't matter how many times you say it. I think in the interest of doing like a public service for victims of these crimes, and you know, because this can also apply even without someone being involved in Scientology. Of course, this is the law for the state of California.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, yeah, and knowing that there is a time limitation, like let's make a point to repeat these things, and yeah.
Because even if one person is eligible or qualified, that's justice for one person. Who knows how many more, but just one person. And if you were part of an SA from 2009 forward, whether you're a child or an adult, this part has changed for it too. Yeah, there's no statute of limitations as a vacated. After 2026, the end of 2026, it'll go back to statute of limitations.
So there are, sorry, Amanda, to answer that. No, it just is in that particular. So what I'm trying to say is that moving forwards, there are no statute of limitations. Yeah, for kids. Yeah, for child SA. But there was specific windows of opportunity opened up for the historical ones. Now, having said that, that's exactly, I guess that is what I'm trying to say, is that there was specific windows opened up where there was no time limit, as in this is called a look back period, because this means like, okay, we've changed the law moving forwards. But now I'm going to give you a year, or we're going to give you 2 years so that we can look back on past claims, and you now have the opportunity. The trouble is that that was not announced in this community. Right. And so, yeah. I totally understand, Amanda, these things can be so confusing. So we're going to try and do our best to like make it, distill it down into but I know that it isn't it isn't, and that's why, you know, you do need legal advice and you do need to reach out and you do need to, but at least if you have like some kind of clue that will lead you there, I like to ask the question of like, I wonder if that applied in my case, or, do you know what I mean? And also I would say that we also do recommend that, that if you do potentially have a case, that you don't exclude yourself based on something that we have said, because you should seek your own your own proper legal advice, because like you said, Mona, earlier, that things can be also based on when you learned of the effects, or when you learned of the abuse, or when you understood that this had happened, or understood that you'd been affected. So there are those kind of variances. So just on that, Amanda, just that when law acts change, there tends to be a look back period that allows for that to be opened up. Some of those have surpassed, but moving forwards, there are no statute of limitations for child sexual abuse in the state of California.
Any child abuse, not just SA.
Yeah.
All child abuse.
Right. Good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess on that kind of positive, well, I know it's hard. It's hard when, listen, I'm someone who has wanted justice. I'm still pursuing justice. So, I definitely feel that it's hard to not be able to sometimes address past things due to statute of limitations. Like my case with LAPD in the state of California was not able to move ahead, not because of lack of evidence, but purely because of statute of limitations. And LAPD had the case at least 1 year before the statute of limitations ran out. And in that year, they didn't do everything that they could to move that case forward. And in fact, they didn't do anything at all from what I could tell. So, yeah.
Right. And
Can't
under
go back
this
in time.
one, you could, because they covered it up, this could be something that you may be able to reopen your claim under. I don't know. But it's certainly worthy of thinking about it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Worth looking into. Yes. Thank you, Amanda. So I'll pop this here. Yes, please seek proper legal advice. These lovely ladies are smart, but not offering actual legal advice, just pointing in a direction to explore. Yes, that's absolutely what we're trying to do. Yes, abuses of Scientology. Definitely look into things. Get your own advice on that, and go from there. Now, on that note, this is really funny. I didn't actually put this tab up, but I might just for a moment. I'm just going to go and look it up. You can keep going, Mona, if you'd like.
It's okay. I was just going to say abuses of Scientology. I know there is several law firms. I had listed them in one of mine. I can't remember the name of it, but they do child, but they also refer for the adult cases also. And I can get you that information to you. Abuses of Scientology.
Yeah. So this was kind of funny. I came across. Sorry, let me just get this. Oh, Marie, thank you for already sending that to me. I've just jumped into my emails now. That's amazing. I will absolutely be reading that after we get off this one. And I sent myself this link. Because I have never seen this before. So let me share this. Just one moment. Share. Okay. So, well, I haven't seen this. Like, I kind of got really excited. Now, let me just say, I don't know this law firm. I'm not affiliated with them. I know nothing about them except for what's on this webpage. I don't know if they're good, great, or terrible. I have no idea. I'm not recommending them, but I just wanted to show you this because this specifically is a law firm that is interested in Scientology sexual abuse cases.
Could you forward that to me too, Mirriam?
Yes, I will. Okay, decades of sexual abuse in the Church of Scientology in the United States and internationally are now well documented. It's just like, I'm like, this is incredible to see this. Like, it makes me emotional. Anyways, the Church of Scientology routinely harasses and discredits sexual abuse victims who have come forward with allegations, but plenty of resources and legal options are available to support survivors. Individuals and their loved ones who have experienced sexual abuse related to the Church of Scientology can contact helping survivors to connect with attorneys ready for help. So on that note, I guess I just wanted to mention that, because even if you had a question and you're like, I'm just not sure, you could actually just fill out this and say, hey, you know, is this something that you can help me with?
And hopefully it's not a con.
Yeah. It also says here, the Church of Scientology has often responded to these allegations with aggressive legal action and surveillance of survivors rather than taking proactive steps to prevent future abuse. Many survivors are fearful of this potential retaliation and never come forward. So it's great to see that they're recognizing that there's those issues there. Despite the challenges, survivors of Scientology abuse have started to come forward to help, to seek help and healing. Now, and it says organizations like Helping Survivors are dedicated to advocating for victims and connecting them with resources and other organizations who can help, including nonprofits and experienced law firms who can help individuals. So this is a really good point. So this is actually not this is actually a place that will recommend will help support you in connecting you up with other support. So that's really, really good. Okay, I wasn't sure about that, actually. I assumed that this was like a law firm, but no, that's not it. So actually even better. And then it has states statute of limitations, information here.
Where
okay,
are they
so
at?
that's... I'll check that in a sec, but... Yeah. What state or
Yeah, it's just wherever they're located.
Look, sexual abuse in clergy. This is so cool. Okay, about us. What is it going to be in there? Or let's see where they are.
Just maybe hit contact us.
Where is that? Child abuse. I just wanted to look at that. That's really interesting. Okay. Let me see
if you go up a little bit, it says.
Oh, contact us. It just has a form.
They may not have where it is because
I guess they could be national as well, because if they're connecting you up. But I'm gonna guess that they're California, just because it's I mean, I don't know, since 2023 it seems, I don't know, it's kind of indicating to me, but not sure where they are.
You just please do diligence before you give all your information to a place that we don't know whether it's the cult area network where it was bought out and
right. Yeah, they're just good point, Mona. Like they're not just like filtering, trying to find out, like trying to like capture all the people who are going to report. Okay,
Sir
so
taught
that's
me
a good
well.
Point. Really, really good point. So let me just see. So this is just so you can see what kind of information they're requiring. So name, email, phone, how old were you at the time, how old are you now, what year did it happen, where did it happen. So that's really important, like when and where, because they need to know which state the law applies to. What state? How do you know the individual? If you feel so, okay, were they your counselor? Were they da-da-da? If you feel comfortable, please tell us more details about what happened and what type of assistance you're seeking. And then they have a privacy policy. They may connect you with a law firm.
I'd be more than happy to be volunteer tribute to call them, find out who they are and what they are before we before we divulge all
Beautiful.
that information.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, let's do that. Well, let's do that, and then maybe we can chat, catch up another time to chat about like what that conversation was like and what did you learn.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would just hate for it to be a trapping site and people get, as I said,
Totally.
you guys have just taught me so well to be a little more skeptical than normal.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a very good idea to just be absolutely, yeah, careful with all those kinds of things. Sorry, I've got a cough coming. Hang on.
That's okay. Yeah, it's always really cool when you see the new things and the information that's finally getting out there and being promoted. But it always makes you go, let's just make sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I did read a little bit about like I did read their like the about pages, and it's being led by like two women, and it talks a little bit about their history and like why they got involved and stuff like that. So, but if you would, yeah, if you want to do that call with them, and that would be really cool. And actually,
it may be one of the best resources. Yeah, go ahead.
Right. Well, what would be even really cool is if like you vetted them out, they're legit, and maybe one of them or a representative could come on and here and chat with us.
That's an excellent idea. Yeah. What do you guys think? Yeah?
That would be cool.
Yep.
Yeah, I love this. Abuses of Scientology. There's definitely a shift. Advocates turning into activists. Yeah. You know, there is absolutely a shift. I really feel it. I cannot tell you when I came across the things that are happening in Australia with the laws around child safety and the ability that it gives the authorities to intervene, to go into these organizations, which they cannot currently do across the US. And so, I mean, I just, yeah, it just was a huge, huge, huge relief for me, because I'm like, okay, well, now we can do things. Like, this gives us the way forward. And then I'm hoping for some changes for the US ahead as well. But, you know, we saw how, you know, how I mentioned earlier in this video, how the High Court decision in Australia with regards to terming Scientology as a religion had repercussions all around the world. And Scientology used that in order to gain religious recognition in country after country after country after country. Now, understand that all of those countries, apart from the US, they have recognized, they have accepted the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. So circling back to that again. So if Australia is using the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child to determine, to set these child safety standards, to then enact those child safety standards, to to be able to do, to bring about legal consequences for people who violate them. Do you see how it's like, I'm telling you, this UN Convention on the Rights of the Child is the thing that will wrap around the world, every single country, and you're going to see some, that's my, you know, it's all happening. I just feel really, really, really positive about where all that's going to.
Oh, most definitely.
And the US is just going to have to, and the US is just going to have to, you know, just gonna have to sort themselves out. Like, they're gonna have to figure this out. The authorities are gonna have to like get this in place. Yeah. Mona, is there anything else that you wanted to add before I end off here?
No, I'm just so appreciative of you having me back on. I love doing lives with you, Mirriam. I love having chats. I love having productive, informative conversations that we can all learn from, and we can all go, oh, wait a minute. Okay, yeah, let's do this. And I absolutely love it. Thank you so much, Mirriam.
Thank you so much for your time and your energy and your efforts. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, this feels good. And I just want to keep doing more of this because, you know, it helps me with like to be able to see a way forward. But also, you know, in the meantime, if we're doing some good for other people. And I love what you said about it being productive as well. So all those things are really, really good. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you,
super
chat.
lovely. Yeah. And yeah, we'll catch up with you all again soon. Bye.